I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, March the 23rd, brought to you in part by the new Nasogen, Bovalis Nasogen 3 PMH, a one-of-a-kind respiratory vaccine, provides unmatched protection for young calves. It also leaves a unique blue shadow on their nose so you know which calves have been treated. For more information, go to unmatchedprotection.com. Captive supplies running low. On our last feeder flash, the one I did for Wednesday, I said that the Packers had put their foot down, and didn't mean that that was going to work, but I had one listener that put a comment on there. His name was Dean Paul, and don't know him, but I loved his comment. He said, my 3-year-old put their foot down too, stammered around a little bit, and then finally went out and did their chores. And I'm not sure what kind of chores a 3-year-old does, but I liked his comment there, and that's true. And I think that's the way the Packers kind of were too. They put their foot down. They didn't want to give any more for cattle, but they really had no choice. These captive supplies that they had, we're on short supplies of market-ready cattle. They started pulling those formula cattle early this month, and now we're getting down here towards the end of the month, and they've about run out of them. And they're also running 10,000 head a week light because the carcass weights are so much lighter, so they don't have near as much product there, and they're getting kind of hungry here. But we had a wild day in the cash-fed cattle market. The real market, what Packers will pay for cattle. But starting out in the morning, we saw Packers giving a 162, and that was even with time on some cattle there at 162. And then pretty soon we started getting them up there 164, 165, which was about steady with last week in the northern plains. But then later in the day, on some really good cattle, which is what they're really wanting, we saw them giving 166 FOB, 167 FOB for a string of really fancy cattle that didn't even get reported because it was after the 2 o'clock deadline. And then they even heard a deal at 168 delivered. Not sure how far that was from the plant, but still some pretty handsome prices on a live basis direct there in the northern plains. And we won't really feel the jolt of that until sometime today here on Thursday, because it happened after the 2 o'clock deadline whenever they put those prices in. But is a pretty fun day in your cash direct fed cattle market, as your Packers were showing that they really need cattle. And I tell you guys all the time, they need your cattle. They desperately need your cattle. Don't give them up early. In the southern plains, we saw some guys selling not necessarily basis jumpers, but they took the 163 in the southern plains, sold enough in the southern plains to really set the market at 163. That's a buck lower. We hate to see that. But in the northern plains, it's going to be at least steady. And with the events that happened late in the day on Wednesday and probably continuing into Thursday here, it's going to be steady to higher in the northern plains. And I think this is kind of a pivot point here where we're going to see fat cattle going higher again. We lost that little rally here the last week or two as they started coming back a little bit, and we're seeing some pressure here just at the time of the year. And your board's not supporting anything because it's kind of scared of the bank failures and things like that. But we're going to get our legs back under us on the fat cattle market here and start going back north again. Talk about your board on Wednesday. April live cattle futures were down 12 cents at 162.30, which gives guys a reason to trade at 163. They get a few cents there on the basis there to add to that, but they would have been better off hanging on a little bit longer, I believe. June live cattle down 25 cents at 155.90. Your back months on live cattle down 7 cents to down 67 cents. Just nobody wanting to jump in on the long side of your cattle futures here. March feeder cattle down 52 cents at 188.25. April down 32 cents at 194.37, and your back months on feeder cattle down 17 cents to down 80. Your grains didn't help anything. May corn was up 3.5 cents bushel at 633.5. December new crop down 2.25 cents at 554.5. May beans down 18.5 at 1448.5. Fat cattle trade, which I said was pretty interesting, and we have seen enough to kind of establish the market. But Iowa sold 6,000 head confirmed on Wednesday at 162 early up to 165.5, and then I told you after that 2 o'clock deadline to turn that information in, we saw several trades higher than that. So it's going to be better than that, but that was at least steady what we saw confirmed on Wednesday, up to 165.5, and maybe a bit better than last week. Dress sales from 264 to 265. Nebraska, 12,700 head on a Wednesday. You think these packers don't need their cattle? Tyson was extremely aggressive on Wednesday getting some cattle bought. They were short and needed some cattle there. They sold cattle in Nebraska confirmed from 162 to 165, but most of those higher prices that I told you in the Northern Plains were in Nebraska, and I'm sure Iowa had some too. Dress sales from 264 to 268. Hadn't seen the 268 dressed. Kansas, 10,800 head in Kansas on a Wednesday. They're hungry for cattle, guys. 162 to mostly all 163. That'd be a buck lower in the Southern Plains. A little bit of dress trade in northern Kansas at 265. Texas, 5,200 on a Wednesday. That was more than they traded all of last week, all at 163. Had a fat cattle sale at Sioux Falls Regional Livestock, lighter offering than normal. Your conventional cattle sold from 165 to 170, and some program cattle up to 172. Box beef cutout values were mixed, with choice higher at 138 higher at 281.30. Selects down 173 at 269.82. Your slaughters keeping right up, 378,000. That's exactly the same as last week at this point, and 15,000 more than the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. Livestock Risk Services with Dakota Moss, office in there at the Exchange Building at the Oklahoma National Stockyards. They are your LRP specialists. If you're turning cattle out this summer, a lot of you are. It's not a new thing for an LRP. Everybody's doing it. And if you're not doing it, you got to check it out. Give them a call at Livestock Risk Services, or go online and check it out at livestockriskservices.com. Talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Wednesday sit at 187.96, down a little bit more, down 24 cents, and it's just been backing off a little bit from all the pressure, but running very, very close to what your latest CME cash feeder cattle index is. Talk about your big sales on Wednesday. OKC West, El Reno Livestock Market, their 2-day sale. Calves on Tuesday, feeders on Wednesday. They sold 6,100 head. Feeder steers steady to $3 higher. Feeder heifers are $3 to $4 lower. Stockers on the heifers weighing under 700 pounds were $1 to $3 higher, and everybody wants the stockers, and they're calling them all the way up to 700 pounds. There's a lot of people buying stockers weighing over 700 pounds because feed's so high. If they can turn those light 7 weights out on some grass and get some cheap gain on them, have them coming off heavier, that's no big deal, and cheapen up the cost of gain on those. Steer calves on Tuesday, $2 to $4 higher in El Reno. Heifer calves steady to $4 lower. And OKC West was your Zoetta stick-out sale of the day on Wednesday on your feeder day. And look at your best tested weights on feeders there on Wednesday at OKC West and El Reno. Cattle Market Central, you see your best tested weight, 637 head of 7-weight steers, weighed 753 with a weighted average price of 187.54. 1,370 head of 8-weight steers in El Reno, Oklahoma. They averaged 846 with a weighted average price of $181.85. Heifers, 647 head of your 6-weight heifers, averaged 657, weighted average price $186.40. Then they fall off quite a bit on the 7-weights, but 894 head of 7-weight heifers in El Reno, average 755 pounds, weighted average price $170.63. Give you some stick-out sales from all around. How about Torrington Livestock Markets in Torrington, Wyoming? They sold 70 head of steers, weighed 672 at $233 a pound. Wow. How about Wright County Livestock Market, a DV auction broadcaster and good people down there, Mountain Grove, Missouri? They sell 67 head of 906-pound steers in south central Missouri at $180.50. But the most impressive quote that I saw anywhere on Wednesday in your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come out of Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota. The feeder cattle sale, they sell 69 head, 815-pound steers at $198.25. And that's your feeder flash for Thursday.